topic on everyone's mind is this bipartisan border bill. I mean, have you gotten the chance to read it yet?
I've gotten the some summaries of it. I have not taken the entire bill and gone through it. We had a lot of information that was leaked out earlier that we were told by the Senate we should completely disregard, which it turns out that actually that was some of the better points of it. Now we find out what is actually in the bill. There's about $60 billion for Ukraine in there. There's all kinds of provisions to make our southern border even more porous, more open, and it's very, very problematic. I'm very concerned that if this legislation was to pass, number one, we're going to be sending another $60 billion to Ukraine when we have yet to get an accounting of the over $100 billion that has already been sent there. And two, that it would put several provisions in statute to not only not secure our border, but to keep President Trump from being able to secure our border when he regains the White House in January of 2025.
Right. It seems like you take a lot of umbrage with how much money might go to Ukraine with this.
I do. How is it that we can send? Now we are well over $100 billion, and they're requesting another $60 billion. But let me put it in terms that makes it easy for everyone. The United States Marine Corps receives about $55 billion a year to run the entire operation. And we're talking about, or the Senate proposes to send more than that to Ukraine to secure their border while our border lies wide open. We're losing about 100,000 people a year to fentanyl. The destruction to humanity is more severe than I think most people realize when you consider the impacts of human trafficking and the sex trade and basically the human slavery that has taken place with all the people that come across the border that have this financial obligation back to the cartel. It is really, really a terrible mess.
Yeah. So just in a summary, it seems like you're not a fan of this bill at all.
Absolutely not. I when I started hearing the provisions earlier on, I felt like I was going to be against this bill. And now that it has been released, again, when you look at what it's going to do to not only keep our southern border open now, but into the future, tie the hands of President Trump when he does take his next term, and the amount of money that gets sent to Ukraine while we're not even securing our own border. And when you start looking at the additional provisions where there's 60,000 additional visas that are going to be issued to people entering in on our southern border, there's another 10,000 visas that they propose to issue to the 100,000 Afghan refugees that were brought here under parole status without being vetted. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. And yet this legislation is actually proposing to grant those folks another 10,000 visas to bring their family members in. And we haven't even determined if they're trying to do harm to our country yet. So I'm a hard no. And beyond that, I think this demonstrates clearly why we should be taking steps to make sure that we change the leadership position in the United States Senate. Mitch McConnell came out and said that he worked closer with Chuck Schumer on this piece of legislation than he ever has on any other piece of legislation. And look at it. It's an absolute disaster. I don't believe that this legislation could have been written worse if the cartels themselves had have taken pen to paper and drafted it.
Out of curiosity, how do you feel about the amount of money that would go to Israel? Just combing through it, it looks like a lot goes there as well.
It does, and as it should. Israel has been attacked by terrorists, and it's an unprovoked attack on our closest friend in the Middle East. And this was carried out in a most heinous manner. And yet the House of Representatives has proposed 3 pieces of legislation to provide support for Israel. We had several $billions in the Department of Defense legislation. We had several $billions in the state and foreign operations legislation. The House of Representatives proposed a standalone piece of legislation, the way that this is supposed to work, and actually provided a pay for, so that it wasn't just going to put additional tax burden on folks across the United States. We took those funds from that 87,000 additional IRS agents that the Biden administration wanted to retain to snoop through Americans' tax records and attack them and harass them, which we could go into many examples where that has happened. So we were going to claw back money from the IRS to pay for the $14.5 billion that was going to be sent to Israel. That legislation, all 3 of those pieces of legislation have been passed. They have been sent to the Senate, and the Senate has done nothing with them. What's Mitch McConnell doing?
Right. I think that's everything I needed on the bill. Is there anything that maybe I forgot to ask you? Anything you might want to add?
No, I think that basically sums up my opinion on the whole piece.